Hello everyone, welcome to my channel again. Thank you very much. For this video, I would like to uh, make a comment in support of one of the DAP MP in debating about the issue of history in education, meaning that he was suggesting that the history syllabus or curriculum of the public school need to actually include the history of all the races, simply because we seem to have a lot of all this racial conflict as well as religious conflict. And so this suggestion came within that light. Now, the Minister of Education, Padlina, had answered that she would take that under advisement, but she reminded the DAP member that there is a committee that sits to discuss about the curriculum of history. And I will have a comment on that, about what I think about that particular committee. Now, for this video, I would like to make three arguments in support of the MP. And I would also finally say something about this committee that the Minister of Education had related to. Now, first of all, I'm in full support of what the MP was saying. For the first reason is simply because when we come to become what is called a nation simply means different tribes of people, different cultures of people coming together. Like the United States of America, there are so many people from Europe coming together to form what is called the United States of America. They come from the UK, from Germany, from France, from Norway, from Switzerland, from all sorts of places. And included there also the indigenous tribes of the so-called Indians, and all that, they become what is known as the United States of America. Similarly, in Malaysia, we have the orang Kedah, orang Kelantan, orang Terengganu, who are actually has different dialects and sometimes different cultures coming together under something called Malaysia or Tanah Melayu at first. Then comes into the Sabah people, Sarawak people, and we have the Chinese people, the immigrant coming from mainland China and also India. And all of them makes up what is called Malaysia. One of the academics said there are more than 40 ethnic groups in our country. And so with the Sabah and Sarawak, the Bajau people, the Iban people, the Dayak people, the Kadazan people, all sorts of people coming together to form a nation. Now, when we want to form a nation, the first thing obviously is that we must know one another. And this is the precise point of which the MP was saying, that we actually do not have any history knowledge of the culture and tradition and values of the different races in the country. And I am also very, very sad that we do not have that. I mean, all of us, we've heard of the Kadazan people, we've heard of the Dayak people, but do we know how the Dayak or the Kadazan people greet each other, for instance? Do we know how they live? Do we know what kind of religion they subscribe to in the early days before they became Christians or Muslims, things like that? Do we know part of their myth and legends? Now, all of these are very important if we are to strike a cordial and courteous and respectful relationship. The Malays have saying, kalau tak kenal maka tak cinta. And I definitely do not know the Iban, do not know the Dayak, do not know the Bajau. At least the Bajau, there was some research done at my university, and now I've become to know some of it. Now, so this is precisely the position where I think part of our history lesson must include the cultures the belief system of all of the races in this country. Now, it doesn't mean that we have to ask all our children to memorize them, but at least they are aware of it and they can actually source the right information, because we now have the YouTube and we have all sorts of resources and information that we can rely on and also use. And so I think that it's high time that the history subject stay away from too much of the politics of the formation of Malaysia, the politics of colonization. I mean, that's too much of it, to the point that we do not know each other. And I think this is a tragedy and part and parcel of why we are where we are and how we have become is because of that. And I am fully 100% in support of what the MP was saying. That's number one. Number two, when you become a nation, one of the things that you need to do is also to formulate what we call the values of the nation and the story of the nation. Meaning, because we are now Malaysia, we were once Malays or Chinese or Indians or Kadazan or Dayak, but now we are also adding on another identity which is called Malaysia. Now, we are also Muslims, Christians, Baha'i, Hindus, Buddhists, Taoists. We have all this religion to also identify ourselves. Now, but once we become Malaysia, what is then Malaysia? What is the values of Malaysia? And we can see that the values of Malaysia is given some sort of understanding from the Rukun Negara, but I think the Rukun Negara is still not enough in terms of that. And there is the idea that Malaysia means we must follow one particular race and one particular religious values as a majority. And yes, that is about us understanding and being respectful. But it doesn't negate the heritage and values of other cultures. So when we form the story of our nation, we need to find the commonalities of all the values of all the races and the cultures in order to make up what may look like a Rukun Negara or the principles of the nation. How would the people feel about each other? So many of these values, let's say respect for the elders, respect for certain institutions and things like that, do they come from the cultures, or is it just made up? And it's better that it comes from a commonality of all cultures. Respect for other belief and also the idea of trusting each other and saying good things to one another, saying nice things, saying things with decorum, with adab, not like some politician who is very rowdy, very kurang ajar, and yet then given a datukship. So this kind of thing should not happen. We must have the values of all, and I am sure all cultures have their way of speaking to the older person and speaking to other people, and those things need to be said. Okay, we need to respect, and this is because of Islam says like this, Christianity says like that, the Dayak people believe in this, the Kadazan people believe in that. And so all this should be mixed into what is called the value system. So when we have the nation, we also need to create the idea that the nation grew and became great, whether in economic sense or social sense, through the active participation of all people and not just one race. And so this is also coming into the idea that we need to have some sort of knowledge on all the political parties that have built up this nation. Here we always talk about UMNO, about MCA and IC, but we seldom talk about the DAP. Now we have Parti Islam Malaysia. We also have now the Amanah. party. But I think all parties like Parti Islam Malaysia and the DAP needs to be given a prominence with their history, their philosophy, their important leaders, in order for us to also identify with that. So this is where we need to actually relook at our history and not just talk about how to reach kemerdekaan just within a small construct of all these identities of political parties that we have learned so far. Now, thirdly, we need to also look at the failures of the country. What are the failures? The failures are, for instance, something like May 13, that occurred in 1969, where thousands died. The failure was also in 1964, perhaps, during the race riots. Now, those are also things that have led to the great black mark of the country. We also have corruption, failures of corruption, and also failures of respect with one another, and also conflict between races. And these are things that needs to be also looked at. And so, with regard to all these failures, we need to create a narrative that all these failures is because of all of us. If we start blaming certain race for this failure and that, then it becomes a very difficult thing for us to be proud of each other, and also we tend to create enemies of one another. Now, some people say that history is about facts. You cannot argue with facts. I'm sorry, this is not the right attitude, because those who say so are not academically involved or understand what history is all about. History is about the past, yes, but there are some things that happens in the past that has happened, but then the interpretation of it, as well as the building of why it happened, the story behind it, is a very difficult process, because it has already happened in the past, and all those probably have already died, and the documents, there may not be any documents and things like that. So this is where history is mostly about the creation of the narrative. Narrative meaning the interpretation and why things happen towards the story. And that is why some scholars have said that history is mostly about the present and the future. For instance, in Japan, Japan caused the World War II in Asia, and they had done a lot of atrocities. They had taken, they had conquered, they had raped, they had burned, they had done all sorts of things in Korea, in China, in Malaya. And so these all have to be put and taught to the Japanese people. What will they teach? Are they going to say that, well, in the olden days, in the 1950s, we went out on a crusade to actually rape and burn and try to conquer so that we can become a richer nation? Are they going to say build a narrative like that? Obviously not. They will build a narrative that says, well, we were trying to modernize other people, put them back into the Eastern mindset, not let the colonial powers try to influence our culture, and so we have freed them of all the yoke of colonization, of aristocracy, of all these things, in order for us to actually modernize the whole of Asia for our each mutual benefit. This is what we call building a narrative, because history is full of things happening, but then how do you put them together in order to make a story? And what would make the story is what you are concerned now in the present, and what you are concerned into the future. So that's why it's called his story or her story. So it's a story, even though, yes, there are facts, but then interpretation and building of narrative totally depends on what's happening now and what we want the next generation to feel or head towards into the future. So that's history, the building of a narrative. Now, finally, I would like to say a little bit about the history committee that makes up the syllabus. Now, I don't know who are the members of this history committee, and it's usual for the government to always bring in so-called expert. so-called professors of history and things like that. Now, if I were to ask you to name who is the professor of history, you probably would know in this country who is a professor of history. Certainly, these people do not contribute to the daily occurrences of news and things like what's happening in the country. Now, so what I believe is that when you have a committee like that, you must have someone who is not so much an expert in history, but more so a philosopher or a good politician who thinks in a wider context, rather than a person who is so involved in history. It cannot be that way. The chairman or the chairperson must be someone all-rounded, someone who is understanding the world and the bigger picture of things, rather than these specific things of what to learn and what not to learn, because that's what usually some sort of professor do, or an academic would do, just to stick within their own so-called specialty. Similarly, in any committee like science, you need someone who understands the world in terms of just enough science for us to be part of the world and to have certain attitude towards the environment and things like. Not a scientist. A scientist would just want everybody to learn every single thing about science, which is not good, and we lose the story or the perspective. If I were to say what is wrong with our education, is all about the perspective of things. Perspective of geography, what is it? Perspective of history, what is it? Perspective of science, what is it? People are looking at the content of science, content of geography, but not the perspective of that subject within the wider picture of a nation building. And so that becomes a major problem there. So with that, I would like to again summarize that I agree with the MP that we need to revamp the history curriculum and look at the idea of learning about all the different races, and also building a narrative based on all the cultures and heritage, so that we become closer to one another. We can easily respect one another, because kita dah kenal, maka bolehlah kita cinta. Kalau tidak, tak kenal dan tak cinta. So with that, I would like to thank you for listening to my comment. Hi everybody. If you would like to own my book and have my signature as well as a personal note from me, please follow the instruction. Thank you.